What up, guys? This is Gabe coming at you with a little demo today. So this demo, we're actually going to be going over the new React hooks. Hooks are kind of a new feature in React. It's a new way to really streamline your state, your component will mount, unmount, that sort of thing. And it really does change the way a lot of people write React apps. So in this video, I'm going to go over kind of a demo of how that works. And also, if you're new to React and you're just kind of starting out and you want to learn everything with the latest and greatest, hooks and make your code really modern, then this video is probably also for you, because we're not going to be doing anything too intense, but we're still going to definitely cover the idea of hooks and how they're essentially used to build React apps. Now, there's a couple new hooks that were introduced. The two main ones we're going to cover in this video is useEffect and useState. useState is essentially used for, if you remember the old React, how, this .state was set up and had all of our state essentially stored in it. And useEffect is more like, componentDidMount, component will unmount, that sort of thing. So let's jump into it. So right here, I have an app that actually doesn't use hooks. Okay, so this is what we had before. And so the way I got this app is I just used create React app to, spin up a new React app. So you can see the standard logo spinning. You've probably seen that before. And I've also added two buttons. So we have the show box, which if we click that, we show a box. And if we click the hide box, it just hides the box. And the other thing that's kind of interesting to note about this is if we go to a console, you can see that if we refresh and click on the show box, you'll see actually we have the component did mount, and if we hit hide box, we have component will unmount. So let's take a look at the code for this application that was built the old way. So you can see we have our standard app class. If you're new to React, probably it's not a huge deal to know what this is. We're going to be going over a lot of it soon. But you can see we have a class for the app, and it expends a component, essentially. So we also have this .state equals this object. And so we basically just have one property here for shows box. It starts out false. We have two functions for show and hide. And both of these just say this .set state, which sets the state of this property show box to true or false, depending on what was selected. So let's take a look at the render function. Essentially, what it does is all this code is pretty much irrelevant except for this code right here, which basically just says this .state.show box. If this is true, then it'll render this box, and if not, just render null. So don't render anything if that's not the case. And I don't need these. I don't know why that's there. And then I also just have two buttons that on click, we just say this .show box, and they're just boxes or buttons that say show or hide box. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Just wanted to run through the old application and how that works. And yeah, so we're going to get started in creating the hooks version of this. And yeah, so let's see, I guess what we could do is just create it in a new React app. So let's just do that. So I'll go back to the terminal, npm init, or actually npx create React app. And then I'll just say hooks demo. So it's going to go to work and create the React app for us. Yeah, like if you don't have create React app, then you should just Google it and get it. And we're back, just so we're not waiting forever. I'm going to fast forward this section of the video. So yeah, basically it created our hooks demo. So to start it up, we can say cd hooks demo. So that's just going to go into the path that we created for our React app, and then just npm start to start up the application. And just real quick, I don't know if I went into this in the last demo essentially, but we have this box component. I think I forgot to show this, but essentially it's just box.js, which has componentDidMount. And inside componentDidMount, we just log out componentDidMount so that you can see it in the console. And then component will unmount just logs the same thing essentially. And box is essentially just a div with a style of, a 200 pixel in size box, and set the background to red just so we can see it. So pretty damn straightforward. So what I'm going to do is, now that our other app is running, we'll go ahead and take a look at that. So we'll refresh and it looks exactly the same. So this is essentially, well, not exactly the same, but this is essentially new created React app with hooks. So we're going to implement hooks in the new app. So I'm going to open this project up in VS Code. Okay, so I went ahead and opened up our hooks version of the React app in VS Code. So you can see that this is kind of the default React app that it gives us. So let's see what we can do. I'm actually just going to delete this entire app.js code. Okay, we're just going to start from scratch. So the first thing I like to do is actually use const instead of functions. That's kind of a developer preference. It's really up to you if you want to use the function keyword or whatever, but I like to just write my functions with const. So I'm going to say const app equals, and then you basically have to pass props into your component. So I'm going to do that here, and I'm going to use like an arrow function here. So, and then there we go. So we have our app created, and to make this an actual functional component, we just have to return a div. So I'll just say class name is app, just like in the other React app, and then I'll just say test. So boom, there you go. So you can see we have a test React app here. So I guess I kind of deleted all the styling, but whatever, we'll just go with it. Okay, so essentially to build the rest of the React app how we had it, essentially we will code the same thing up. So what I'm going to do is, let's start with our state. So the new way to do this with hooks is we don't have the concept of constructors in hooks because it's all functional components. So what we can do is, if we want to use the new React hooks in order to, build our component, we don't have to use like classes or extend React component, right? So we can just say const shows box. And then there's also a second sort of thing we have to declare here, which is set shows box. Okay, so essentially what this is going to do is we'll read shows box to render the box, and then to essentially set whether it shows or not, we're going to use this function to actually set the state instead of our this.setState function with the old component system. So I'll do that, and then in order to use these hooks, you actually have to specify them here. Well, you don't really necessarily have to, but If you want it to have an elegant name, you can say like useState and useEffect. So we're just going to be covering useState and useEffect in this video. We might make some other demos pretty soon of some of the other, hooks that you can use. Some other examples are like useRef, and actually memoize is pretty cool. So maybe I'll kind of make a demo about that pretty soon. But yeah, we've imported useState and useEffect. Actually, we're going to use effect in another component. So I'm actually just going to use state here. So we can say useState, and then we can enter in sort of a value to start with. So in this example, I'll just say like false. So yeah, that would essentially be the equivalent of in our old app if we just started out saying like this dot state and then made this property for show box and just set it to false right out the gate. So we have our shows box now, and I guess I'll create the box component now. So I'll do box.js, and to build this component, of course, we have to import React, and this time I'm going to use the, useEffect. So again, I'll do the functional component, box equals props, and then use the arrow function. And then I'll just export this box so that we can import it into the app.js. So for the box, I'm just going to return the same thing I did in the other example, just a div, nothing special, with the style that I've kind of hackily integrated into the code here. So we have the style, just setting its width, height, and background color. So we got our box component now, and I'm going to go ahead and import box into my app.js. So now what we can do is actually, conditionally render our box depending on if this shows box is set to true, right? So all we have to do in order to do that is just use these curly braces just like we did in the other app. Nothing's really changed here. Just ask if shows box is true, and then render box. And otherwise just render null. So let's take a look at what we got so far. Okay, so we obviously don't have anything in our app yet. And the reason for that is because, our shows box never gets set to true. So if it never gets set to true, it's obviously going to render null. So it's not rendering the box. So let's figure out a way to render the boxes. I think in the other example, what I did was I just had like two buttons that said show and hide box. So I could just do that again. So what we're going to do is say button on click equals, and then I'll just say show box. What's cool about this is we could probably call this set shows box inside of the on click here. But in this video, I'll just, for simplicity, make like functions out here. So show box is essentially just a regular function that says set shows box to true. And then we can just say show box. So now we have a button here that says show box. If we click it, boom, the box shows. Nice. So we have a box in this sort of component. And then I guess we can also have a button to hide the box. And we can make another function for hide box. And just set it to false. So hide box just sets show box to false. So now we have two buttons here. So show box, hide box, show box, hide box, show box, hide box, show box, hide box. So spend a couple hours and, click these buttons, and then when you're ready to move on, just come back to this video and continue following it. So the next thing that we're actually going to take a look at is how do we sort of replicate the same componentDidMount and componentUnMount in the new hooks API. So right now we're just using the state hook, but I'm actually going to show you how to use the useEffect hook in the box component. So essentially the way you do that is you just literally say useEffect inside your function component. And then you pass a function inside of the useEffect hook. And so essentially what we can say is like console.log, useEffect. Okay, so then if we actually look at the console logs now, you'll actually see that if we click on show box and look at the output, the useEffect was actually called. So this is the same exact thing as, componentDidMount. So as soon as the component mounts, useEffect is called. Now, what about the unmount? So when we click the hide box button, it actually doesn't say unmounted, and that's because we haven't implemented it. So essentially the way this works with hooks is you call your function here for the basically what's sort of the equivalent of componentDidMount. But you can also return another function to this effect, which is actually pretty cool. So you can say something like componentUnmount. And then if we now go ahead and use our app, show box, hide box, you can actually see in the logs that our componentUnmount was called when we hid the box. So show box, hide box, show box, hide box. And if you do it enough times, you'll maybe get satisfaction eventually. So you can see that our logs are working essentially the same way that the old, component worked. So yeah, that's about it. That's sort of how to use the new useState as well as the new useEffect hooks in React. This is actually a really cool way to build applications. I've been using it for some time now, and I can really recommend to definitely, if you're starting a new React application, definitely give hooks a try and, definitely look into it. I think it can really make a lot of applications a lot simpler in terms of, code base and sort of a system architecture in general. So that's about it. I'm going to sign off and I'll let you get going. Peace.